A very good morning to all our participants and a warm welcome to our speaker for the present session. This is Mohua again, your session coordinator for the pre-lunch sessions. So let us begin our first session of the morning with Dr. Kaustav Deka's talk titled Margins and Marginalizations, Gender as Multilayered Site of Negotiation and Transformation in Northeast India. Dr. Deka is Assistant Professor of Political Science in Dibrugarh University. So without much ado, I would request Kaustav sir to begin. Kaustav sir, it's all yours now.
A very good morning to all of you, and thanks Dr. Mohua for this kind introduction, and let me also thank the Lady Brabourne College for giving me this very special opportunity to interact with all of you. Special thanks to Professor Shivli Sarkar, Principal of the college, Dr. Parna Ghosh, who is the Director of Women's Studies Center, Ms. Mona Lisa Jha, who is the Joint Director of the Center, and of course Amrita Basu Roy Chaudhuri, who I had the opportunity and the delight to meet here for a conference, and through which I think I have this opportunity and the privilege to interact with all of you. So yeah, I mean, the topic has been already mentioned, and as maybe you can kind of know from the topic that what I'm trying to actually do is that I'm trying to broad a very large canvas, so to say, of a few movements and few incidents and a few observations from Northeast India, and try to see how this whole discourse of gender is so complex and entwined with lots of other complexities in society. There are a lot of entanglements here, a lot of history, and a lot of flow of society and state kind of relationships that is involved. And in the course of my presentation, which perhaps is for about maybe 45 minutes or so, and followed by questions, discussions, and other comments, what I'll try to do is that I will try to share a few snippets from my travels into different parts of Northeast India, share a few photographs with you, and keep some of the conversation open-ended, because as we all know, the discourse of gender itself is so fluid and something so evolving, and more so in a place like Northeast India, which we will soon kind of get into. So let me try to share my screen with you all. Can I share my screen? Is it allowed?
Yes, of course, sir. You can.
Okay, I'm trying to see, but okay, I think it should come now. Is it coming? Can you see?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
All right, okay. So yeah, so the theme of the lecture is margin and marginalizations, gender as multi-layered site of negotiation and transformation in Northeast India. So I mean, as we see, I mean, I'm trying to in fact bring on board few key words here, negotiation and transformation being some of the most contested topics that we are dealing with right now in Northeast India, and how the gender dynamics are playing out in this scheme of negotiation and transformation. But before that, we will have to first of all, the screen is moving, right? It's going to next slide.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
fine.
we can see that. Yes.
Sure. It's better to confirm. Sometimes it is stuck on one slide.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah. So, I mean, what I think is of primary importance here is that first to understand why we are trying to talk of Northeast as a special context here, because of course, I mean, since it is a conference or workshop on women's studies, and we all know that how gender has always a specific context in whichever place we talk about. But in the case of Northeast, it assumes some specific significance. And broadly, if we try to, in a way, summarize, or if we try to see the outline of some of the specifics, we can see that there are three large, parameters through which this region, this category called Northeast India, which has been a policy-making category for quite some time now, or you can say a category of imagination also, is primarily approached through three broad parameters. One is, of course, this region has been seen through a security-centric lens. That means any activity, any developments, any deliberations regarding this region has been always passed through a national security-centric approach. Then comes the issue of cultural obscurity, as again most of us would know that for the longest time there has been some kind of a cultural gap. There has been a lack of information, awareness, or any other kind of cultural exchange to a large extent. Not completely, but to a large extent. And of course, this situation is also changing in a rapid way. But this cultural gap that existed for a long time, which reflected in the absence of the region in, say, school curriculum, in the absence of the region in popular culture in other parts of India in many ways. So this influence also extended to the perception of the region. And of course, very strongly, this whole idea about the region being development deficit, how government of India has been, uh, taking up different initiatives to fill up this so-called development deficit, and how it has, in a way, manifested in different measures, most prominently in large infrastructure development, huge plan outlays. So this explains the predominance or the prevalence of two very dual set of developments, dualistic kind of developments, that at one hand you have Armed Forces Special Powers Act or other kind of acts which are considered many a times draconian, that they curb civil liberty, and that it is considered many a time by many groups complain that it is violative of human rights. So that one discourse is there which basically justifies or which thinks that this type of acts are very much necessary, that military has to be given special powers. But at the same time, the contradiction is that the region also has received a lot of attention from the center when it comes to issues of development and developmental activities. We have ministry like Development of Northeast Region, which is donor ministry, which is a very unique ministry, that a region, a specific ministry has been made, and it is getting budget from all other departments and ministries. So this dualistic position that we see from the state side, that at one hand you are talking about making the presence of military strong, but at the same time you're also talking about undertaking different developmental work. So this peculiar situation of Northeast, sometimes some of the scholars, they call it a reign of exception, especially following up from scholars like Agamben and Foucault. They try to explain that Northeast is a reign of exception, that the exception becomes the norm. And we have to think of these three broad parameters in the back of our mind when we talk about gender, because this specific positioning, this specific, in a way, context of Northeast India also is very important to understand the way gender dynamics plays out in Northeast India. So moving on now, it's very interesting also to know how the body of women in India's Northeast is in a way both racialized, gendered, and also exoticized. So you can see these two photos, which of course already is very self-explanatory. You can see the contradiction in the photos, that we have situations in different parts of India, especially the metros of India, the big cities of India. And in fact, it was more so in the last decade or so. There was a phase where it intensified, that this whole series of attacks, which has racially motivated attacks based on people's features, based on people's looks, allegation on food habit, etc. This allegation of racial attacks happened, and it also involved molestation, rape. So this basically resulted in widespread protest, many a times led by women, students, and working women. As we know that there is a very, very significant and ever-growing population of young men and women from different states of Northeast going out of the region in search of job and education. So it's a sizable population, a migrant population that is there. So they have also become vocal about these issues, and they are taking up the protest. At the same time, you can also see on the right in premier fashion shows and in high-end brands how fashion and in fact the very body of Northeast women, which is supposed to be exotic and having some appeal, and there are a lot of scholarly work on this, and we can come to it later, this whole idea of exotic appeal and this whole idea about cosmopolitanism. So so it's again very interesting development that it's racialized and gendered. So there are this different type of binaries that we can see, but they're coexisting at the same time. Now my lecture one, I would like to focus or give example, not so much focus, but give example of primarily two social movement, women-led social movement in Northeast, and these are names that nowadays we often hear in different through different incidents and through different examples. One is this group called Mera Paibi of Manipur. Um, uh, this name perhaps might be familiar with a lot of you because right now the kind of crisis that is going on in Manipur is one of the worst, you can say that worst post-colonial tragedy of post-colonial India, modern tragedy of post-colonial India that is unfolding in Manipur. This name of Mera Paibi is coming up very often. So this might be familiar to some of you. And the other name also might be familiar because of other reasons that we'll discuss is Naga Mothers Association, or it's called NMA. So now Mera Paibis are having a long legacy, in fact. If you look into women-led mobilization or women-led social movements or just women as social mobilizer in not only in India but in South Asia. In fact, Mera Paibi can be counted as one of the very pioneering early group. Their legacy dates back to pre-colonial times, and Manipur is having this distinct history of women-led wars, which is called Nupilan in the local language, or Women's War. So they had this glorious history of not only one but a series of Nupilans or women wars, where women mobilized themselves against issues of price rise, black marketing, excess tax. So it dated back to the time of the king, Manipur king, and also of course by the time British was involved as the political agents and they are having the political clout. So it was also anti-colonial in to that sense. So Manipuri women, Meitei women to be specific, which is the largest community in Manipur. Or the valley-centric community in Manipur. So they have always been the literal torch bearers. Now, Mera Paibi translates as women with a torch. You can see in the photo, in fact, that is the very definition or very meaning of Mera Paibi, women who comes out in the night with this flaming torches in hand. So this legacy of resistance, which was in a way primarily in the economic domain, and of course it also has this connection, as you can see, with the domestic functioning, because women are controlling or taking after the household, so the price rise will affect women. So of course that dynamics is also there. But what is interesting is that how they also translated this mobilization also to be more visible in the public sphere, in the sense women run markets, which is another very unique characteristics of Manipur. But this is of course there in many tribes, but in Manipur, especially in Imphal, they have made it more organized. So we have this very famous Ima Kaithel, that place that nowadays whoever visits Imphal, it has almost become a very prominent tourist spot in a way. But it is a thriving spot of also local economy. It's a 3,000 women strong market, the mothers market or Ima market. So, and this is there in many other cities or towns of Manipur also. So this whole legacy also has continued in those sphere. But what took this mobilization of Mera Paibi to a different level, that is very interesting. And if we spend some more minutes on Mera Paibi, we also have to discuss that uh, Mera Paibis were also once known as the movement for Nishabandi. That means they were strongly taking up issues of like prohibition, issues of curbing the use of narcotics and other substances in the society. So they were very much focusing on different acts of quote unquote social reformation. But it was the troubled history of Manipur with militarization that gradually brought them into the larger political fold, so to say. There was an incident in somewhere in 1970s, late 70s and early 80s, a series of incidents, in fact, where those were the decades where Manipur was having a lot of crackdown by the state, military crackdown of different paramilitary forces and other forces. There would be often a lot of arrests and a lot of encounters, and Manipur, as we know, was in the grip of insurgency uh, since that time. And of course, it's a very long history. It predates even 70s. It's a long history. In fact, that's a different debate, different discussion. that the whole genesis of militancy and genesis of insurgency in Northeast India. All the states have their specific history and specific kind of a timeline, so to say. But anyways, coming back to Mera Pavis, so there was a particular arrest. If you look into the history of Mera Pavis mobilization, they also started kind of demanding that if a particular individual is wrongfully detained, if the women of the community deems that the person, it can be he or she is wrongfully detained, they try to in a way do dharna, gherao, and stop the forces and try to in a way rescue, or you can say try to stop that which is in their eye is an illegal detention. So through this act, Mera Paivis became slowly drawn to this whole um, complex politics around militarization. And this other photo is, anyways, is one of the most iconic photo about human rights, as all of you will be aware of, which is when this one Manorama Devi was allegedly tortured and raped and killed by the security forces. So after that, you can see this is outside the gate. Is actually this is the older palace of the Manipuri king, which is now the headquarter of one of the army kind of a battalion. So there was a protest outside this Kangla palace, in fact. So there's a protest outside the palace. You can see it's called Indian Army Repas. So this was a very big event, and as we know, it shook the conscience of the nation. And many people, in fact, for the first time heard the name of AFSFA and became aware of what is AFSFA after this photograph. It was a very powerful intervention by the women, and they were the Mera Paibis of that locality. And Mera Paibis, you have to understand, is a very well-structured organization. And they have their branches and their presence in different localities. In Manipur, it's called Meitei, it's called Leikai. So different localities will have their own organization and chapters and branches of Mera Paibi. And in any kind of this situation, they quickly can mobilize and they can come together for this different protests. So this presence, this strong presence of Mera Paibis now have created a very uh, significant situation from the point of view of women's participation in public life. And as you can see, at one way, it has also translated into their economic participation, their participation in protest and other mobilization. But it also always has this thin line that it will also lead to issues like moral policing, issues like, composing quick quotes. In fact, there was a word in Meitei law is called Paza, if I'm pronouncing it right. That is that local courts or trial courts that is composed of local women. So it has also the propensity to become so-called kangaroo courts. So these are the debates. We'll come to it later. But now let's have a look at Naga Women's Association, which is Naga Mothers Association, sorry, which is a apex women's body of Nagaland. And their constitution, in fact, says that all Naga women, all adult women of Nagaland, by the very definition of their being Naga, can become already is deemed members of the association, and they have to pay 1 rupee symbolic kind of a joining fee. So, and they have also structured themselves very much in line with their traditional structures of society. Unlike Mera Paibi, as you can see, Mera Paibis are almost very much a cultural body which is in a way rooted with uh, the past history of Manipur dating back to centuries. Unlike that, of course, Nagamada Association is a modernist association, quote unquote. They are formed in 1980s. But you can see that even they, in a way, have composed themselves in such a way or have rationalized themselves in a way that they have their existence is attuned to the structures of the Naga tribal societies. Now, as we know, tribal societies, without, by exception of Nagas, I mean, most tribal societies are in a way having a structure in which women are also seen as caretaker of the house, or in a way they take care of, they are primarily the uh, caregiver. Of course, this is against the our usual stereotype or usual understanding that we think that there are larger mobility and visibility of women, which is of course also there, that there are larger visibility and mobility of women in tribal societies when it comes to farming and other activities. But the strong hierarchy when it comes to the uh, household, when it comes to the control of the household, there of course the patriarchal division is still very much there. And of course there are exceptions of tribes, and there are differences in maybe matrilineal tribes, and that's a different debate, the differences in that. But in general, if you talk about most tribes in Northeast India, so Nagas are no exception, where women are, we are not considered so much of a central part in decision making process. Decision making in the sense for the tribe, for the community, or for the village, the larger decision making, women were always supposed to play a second fiddle to those decisions. But there was a specific importance to women, which NMA has very pragmatically used. That is, in time of conflict between two villages or even within two tribes or any kind of conflict, uh, women were given the role of peacemakers. They were the arbiters of peace. That they are the one who can negotiate peace on behalf of the two warring communities or two warring villages or tribes. So that specific part of traditional practice or traditional wisdom has been utilized by organizations like NMA to say that they are just continuing this traditional practice in modern light, in new light. But interestingly, that is how NMA started. And NMA, again, like if we see with the parallel example of Mera Paibis, also started with specific concerns like issue of drug trafficking into Nagaland, prevention of alcoholism, which is still now also, which is one of their main kind of area of activity, issues of HIV and AIDS, which was becoming at one point a growing concern. So they also started with shelter homes, rehabs, other activities like that. Basically, again, like Mera Pabi, taking care of the household. But like Mera Paibi, NMA also seems to gradually get drawn to larger political events and political activities that goes on in Nagaland. As we know, Nagaland is often described as the land of insurgency, the struggle of NSCN, the militancy of NSCN is called the mother of all insurgencies in Northeast India. So it has the longest history of insurgency. NMA started a campaign saying shed no more blood, and they said that they will become as mothers. Again, the word mother is very crucial here. They say that as mothers, they are the ones, they understand the pain and the suffering of the family, of the society, and it is their solemn duty as mothers that they have to step out and try to be the intermediary of peace between the both side. So the whole sentiment and the whole language, which is, by the way, also reflective of other states and other parts of Northeast India where similar situation was faced, the situation of insurgency. So this issue of mother, that, how can the mother intervene? What is the role of the mother? So, and in different interviews, NMA said that actually that they are influenced by the traditional elders, the traditional inspiration of the elders. So they were trying to make it very clear that they are not trying to assert uh, different space, or they are not trying to assert their uniqueness or their identity going against the wisdom of the society. So NMA, in some points, they were very clear about it. But interestingly, if we see later developments of Nagaland, and because of which a lot of people again got to know about NMA and such organization, was this uh, volatile political debate that had been going on since last 2 to 3 years, especially, which was about this passing of this urban local bodies bill, which was ensuring 33% of reservation for women in those bodies. And as we know, this had created a huge uproar in different parts of Nagaland, in Naga society. There were demonstrations of different tribes. As we know, Nagaland is a composed of many tribes, and each tribe has their apex bodies. And they were in fact supposed to be working with NMA. NMA women were supposed to be part of all the apex bodies as well as NMA. But this had become a point of conflict. And this whole position by NMA, that they are not trying to go against the traditional wisdom of society, is interestingly can be seen a bit strained here. The NMA seems to become a bit more assertive here, where they were pushing for the placing of this bill, and the apex bodies are different tribes. They were opposed to this bill tooth and nail because they thought that it violates the customary provisions given to Nagaland, the special customary provisions that is given to Nagaland under Article 371 A to F. So that became a point of conflict, and this provision was seen as an intrusion into the traditional rights of the Naga society. The traditional rights of the Naga society, where they said that they will not follow this this mandated reservations for women. So, but NMA at that point took a very assertive position, and as we know, some of you who have followed the news there, uh, members of, or especially the office bearers of NMAs were pressurized, intimidated, their lives were under threat. A lot of women were forced to resign from by respective tribal bodies, respective tribal apex bodies, forced a lot of people to resign from NMA. So NMA but still stood their ground, and one could see that by by from 1980s to 2020s, by the in the course of 40 years, you could see that a lot of young women and also young men, the young generation of Nagas, also gradually was understanding this position of NMA, which was basically for the constitutional rights of women of Nagaland. So NMA wanted to basically justify or try to explain the larger society that how this kind of progressive provisions like 32% reservation women is not violative of the constitutional status and other rights of the Nagas. And as we know, just recently Supreme Court has also intervened, and Nagaland government has assured the Supreme Court that it will go ahead with this constitutional election. Nagaland government in fact had to cancel the elections once out of the public pressure, but after Supreme Court has intervened, Nagaland government has again promised to hold elections with this provision for reservation for women. So that way you can see that NMA has actually secured a very important victory here. Although the widespread violence and widespread opposition against NMA also shows that how a large part of the society remains critical and remains in a way skeptical about the positions and about the demands of organizations like NMA. So although these organizations like NMA are appreciated, they have been always appreciated and respected as peacemakers, that their role is very much defined and slotted, that they can be mothers, they can talk about, the angst of society through the mother's eyes, they can try to bring, quote unquote, the sons, because again, in this discourse, daughters are almost invisible, the sons to the table of negotiation with the state, but their role beyond this sphere uh, when it comes to demands for rights or assertion of space, that was not so much appreciated and respected. So that was a very telling example or a telling episode. But what is interesting for us to reflect on is that after decades of existence of organizations like Mera Babies in Manipur or Naga Mothers Associations in Nagaland, many a times the common women who will have multiple identities of belonging to a certain class, of belonging to a certain locality, of belonging to a certain tribe, so that women with ordinary common women with multiple identities are still somewhat missing, or they can, in a way, their situation is forever in a way in a flux, that they also take part in this organization but their situation remains in a flux. So incidents in Manipur that is happening right now, or other everyday incidents in Nagaland that happens now and then, also gives us some window to understand this type of situation. Now after the mm, that whole incident about ULB bill and how the office bearers of NMAs were hounded and threatened, and there were mass attack on government buildings. Government buildings were set on fire by student bodies and other tribal apex bodies, uh, one could see that this whole idea that the struggle of common women that is not affected by these mobilizations or counter mobilizations. In fact, if you see that the women who are struggling on a day-to-day basis for just their survival, the situation in a way remains completely unchanged. And this fluidity of kind of, this identities that one can be from a particular class or a tribe or a class, that their fluidity of identity is more complex on the ground. That became very apparent in the case of recent Manipur conflict. I'll draw your attention to a particular episode, a particular incident, which was very, very interesting, is that this very heartbreaking incident that happened in Manipur last year, in fact, 2000, June 2023, where that was almost beginning, you can say, phase of this mindless, insane violence in Manipur, which kind of now seems to just drag on. It's been more than a year now, and there apparently is no end to it, with fresh bouts of violence breaking out. Every now and then we are getting news of fresh bouts of violence. So here there was a case of this young child, in fact, the child who were basically off from an interfaith couple, and that mob was so bloodthirsty that everybody's identities were painted in black and white. You are either this or that, you are either a friend or an enemy. So common women who were basically living their life in a very intermixed situation were completely, in a way, absent from this discourse. And these are just not, say, an exception or a case which is very rare. As one would, those who know the societies of Northeast India knows that uh, our societies are so intermixed because for practical reasons that people are just living side to side as neighbors for hundreds of years. So this coexistence has resulted in just a different grammar of kind of, social life. So those kind of hybrid existence, hybridity is not understood or is tried to be always denied or crushed. So this type of situation also leads to a different type of dynamics, which we will discuss in the next slide. Is that, but before that, let me try to explain the photograph. And in fact, this was a photograph that was shared in one of the very popular blog run by one Naga blogger, and I am using it with permission. So basically, this is just, of course, the person who posted wanted it to be something humorous. So, but there is a larger message in the photograph, so that's why I'm sharing it here. Basically, this was when, after COVID, around the time when this sudden lockdown, and a lot of people from Northeast, as I told you before initially, as I mentioned, that a large section of young people from Northeast are living in different cities of India. They are a migrant population. A lot of them, in fact, majority of them had come back uh, out of panic, out of desperation in the time of COVID to the respective villages. So this person was trying to be humorous, saying that it's dedicated to all the city returnees at their hometowns and villages. He's trying to show it's like a mismatch, that you have become very fashionable and you're so used to city life, but you've come back to your village, which is all the chicken and all you can see, like traditional house. But there's a larger, in a way, symbolic message here, is that, and this picture is, in fact, it is actually true. It is not that, it's not a caricature. It's like if you visit parts of Northeast India on a Sunday, which is the church day, I'm talking about mostly Christian states, Nagaland, Mizoram, and elsewhere. Uh, I mean, you will actually encounter scenes like that, not like this, not like this particular photo in the screen, but you will see very well-dressed young men and women, but walking through very dusty roads, broken roads, and they're attending church and very well-dressed, smartly dressed, and so this is, in a way, a sense of also, in a way, assertion and rebel in their own sense, that, in a way, the young people of Northeast who are now also exposed to so much outside, that they also know how to reclaim their place. And in some time, like I gave the previous example of the intermixed couple and other things. So this young lot sometime also knows basically how to stand up against these different forms of control and oppression, not only necessarily from the state, because that is the usual understanding that young people or people in Northeast are often engaged in different rebels, different protests, different anti-state activity. But in a way, if you actually look into it, there is a strong participation also alongside protest. So protest and participation goes hand in hand, number one. And number two, the protest is also many a times against one's own society, against one's own mechanisms of control or control regimen. So that this generational gaps, in a simple language, if you explain, or this cohort of young voices, the cohort of young voices that is coming up is also at times even unconsciously, not consciously all the time, even unconsciously they are trying to bring a new dynamics in this whole debate about visibility of women, assertion of women, gender debates and all that. And as I found out, I'm going through different discussion on social media and so and so. You take it against Mehra Paibi. Of course, present Manipur situation is again very different because whenever this situation becomes tensed, mobilization patterns changes. But before that, overall, when Mera Pipe is one of the predominant activity was to clamp down on drinking. As we know, Manipur for the longest time, only now they have slightly changed the norms and regulations, but for longest time, for many years, they were considered so-called quote-unquote a dry state. That means liquor was not allowed, IMFL was not allowed. So Mera Babies used to go place to place trying to find out those type of sailors, do punish them. So do this social control. So this moral supervision was resented by some people, and as you said, this young woman said that if such a conflict situation, where else will we get our release and relief? So that similar echo we can hear in the case of Nagaland also. NMA and the church, of course, they were in favor of total prohibition. Right now also, in fact, this is an ongoing debate in Nagaland because uh, that act, NTPL, that is Prohibition of Liquor Act, that act is now being debated and public opinion is divided on both sides. And this idea about clubbing this prohibition, issue of prohibition religion, again was contested by those who said that alcohol in a way is also a form of part of traditional culture in a way. Local alcohol is part of traditional tribal culture. So basically that use of local liquor and other alcohol in festivals, prominently, as we all know, the famous Hornbill Festival. So that debate also had happened, and NMA was seen as too conservationist, too conservative and too traditionalist by some segments. So that this debate, this paradox between the modernist pull and modernist push and traditional pull, that we have seen happening in many other spheres also. And as I said, right now in Manipur, of course, since these issues have become, the conflicts have become so identity-centric, it has almost become what we say an ethnocide, that one ethnic group versus another ethnic group, and it has taken a very high proportion. So organizations like Mera Paibis are at the very forefront, and they can play a very crucial role here as peacemaker. In fact, NMA had visited Mera Paibi, and interestingly, NMA and Mera Paibi, they have this working kind of a relation. They visit each other from time to time, and interestingly, they were given a peace award by that lifetime peace award by Times Foundation back in 2015. They got a joint award. They are sometimes clubbed in the same category, but as I said again, these organizations have to walk this very tight rope, that they had to assert their own space as women, about their own specific rights and demands of women, but at the same time they are not at all free, or their objectives and ideas are not at all outside the community centric discourse. So that's the trap that they somehow try to negotiate themselves out of it. And so if we place it from the perspective of, say, social movement theory or theories of social mobilization, perhaps what Charles Tilly had called social movement organization, a type of organization Charles Tilly had called, and Tilly and Townsend had called a social movement organization. Mera Pipes and NMA precisely fits into those type of model, where he says that social movement organizations are those organizations that keeps the movement going even in their lean phase, even in their latent phase. They keeps the movement going by organizing programs. They keep the movement going by keeping the members involved in different activities. So they somehow seem to be playing that role, that they are not always at the forefront of any movements or any big mobilization, but through their activities. So whenever the time comes, like the total prohibition bill or urban local body bill, that comes, NMA can be seen to be at the forefront. In the case of Manipur, this big ethnic conflict that's going on, Mera Paibi's role has become very crucial. In fact, it's almost like a full circle of history, you can say. Like the very example that I gave you, that in 1980s, where Mera Paibis were trying to block the military vehicles and trying to demand that so-and-so is wrongfully detained, and they wanted to rescue them. And they are standing up against violations. They are what they alleged to be violations. It's almost like a repeat of that. And in today's context also, there are so many videos, you've perhaps seen videos, footages, photographs, where you can see women, Manipuri women, Meitei women, trying to in a way, trying to stop some vehicle, or trying to argue with the police or paramilitary, saying that they are being biased, that they're wrongfully detaining so and so. So the whole idea about they are the justice giver, or that they have to stand up against the injustice committed by the establishment or specifically by the state. So that role is again back to Mera Pebis. But as I said, in this whole picture, in this whole equation, what is very, uh, in a way, pertinent to keep in mind is that there are still these larger structures of operation, still larger, bigger frameworks of operation, out of which the women, the common ordinary women of Northeast India, regardless of their location, regardless of their class or tribe, are trapped into. So this triple marginalization, so we can talk about triple marginalization. As we all know, women often are marginalized twice. We call it twice marginalization, but in the case of Northeast, we can say triple marginalization. Uh, of course, first of all, being women, they always will be victimized, or they will have their own specific set of issues and problems. Then as part of a community, as certain communities, the first marginalization is part of community. As we saw in the case of Northeast, communities are in a way most communities, we cannot of course generalize, but most communities are very dominant when it comes to the issues of division of household labor and other spheres of decision making, etc. So that marginalization happens first of all at the community level. Women are often denied a very strong agency at that community level. If you see the composition of most of the uh, structures of leadership or decision-making bodies of the indigenous societies or the tribal societies, you can see that women are marginalized at that level most or more often than not. And this often, of course, this goes against the preconceived or the dominant understanding about women of Northeast being very empowered and mobile and so and so. But if you see this primary marginalization at the decision-making level, that is, of course, very, very prominent. Second marginalization happens at the level of state, which we have seen numerous cases how women's body is acted, women's body is taken to be a site of domination. And there are so many documentation of that, so many documentation and study of, how through subjugation of women body, many a times one tries to suppress and control movements. So take up any case of any either nationality movement, militancy movement, or other kind of social movements in Northeast, the incidence of alleged violation or molestation of women is very, very high. And not by any specific one body, but across board by different official bodies and agencies. And again, in inter-ethnic or other conflicts of one community against the other community also. Like the case of Manipur, again, is a prime example of that how respective communities are trying to, in a way, seem to be trying to dominate the women of the other community. There are molestation and other torture on the women of other communities. So women's body becomes the site of domination, remains the site of domination, be it interethnic conflict, be it state-society conflict. But for the Northeast, very interestingly, there remains another additional site of marginalization or site of domination. That is the issue of racialization of the body of the women of Northeast of India. So there are very powerful testimony, powerful incidents and cases, accounts where women of Northeast has often complained that there are, ways character assassination, there are attempts to paint them in a particular light just because of this stereotype about based on the looks. So this racialization leads to different forms of uh, oppression and marginalizations. So that is the third point of the structure. Those triple marginalization continues to haunt the women of Northeast India at large. So you can see this photograph of this woman, and she was in her 70s or perhaps more than that, and I saw this in somewhere in December. So this is a very common photo of women coming back with a very, very huge load of either wood, firewood, or either other forest products, or literally like what we call as backbreaking. So after days of field work, and they have to go home and again perhaps cook for the family, for the husband, and take care of the house. So this hard life structure. So that continues for years and years. So women of Northeast India had to negotiate with this larger structure. And as we discussed the case of NMA and Mera Baby, they have taken gradual steps. They have negotiated at different level. If you see their journey of transformation, they are doing multiple negotiations at the same time. And the case of Naga Mother Association also represents that it is also possible, of course, to pressurize your society at large and also the state to concede significant kind of benefits and significant concessions, as we saw the case of the urban local body election, that how Supreme Court was also roped in, and through the court's pressure, government has consented as of now. But again, as we see that these dynamics are wide open, until and unless this fundamental structures of triple marginalization is not approached, one does not or one cannot intervene at that level, we'll continue to see a very complex dynamics where it might be one step forward and two step back for women. So this is what I had to share with you for now. And perhaps if there are questions, comments, any other discussions, we can go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaustav sir, for such a wonderful and engaging presentation. Thanks. Thank you so much. I would now request the participants to come up with their questions or comments. Yes, Amrita? Amrita?
Yes, may I?
Yes, please, please, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Kaustav sir, for delivering such a thought-provoking, enthralling lecture. And what I feel like you have just allowed us to step into an untrodden domain where the contribution of women towards changing society is too much to be put to words, first and foremost. And secondly, being a practitioner of women's studies, what I feel after hearing your lecture thoroughly, what I feel the mainstream women's movement of India, it seems that the mainstream feminist of India rather fails to acknowledge how the Northeast keeps its own mark in the domain of women's movement. It's very unfortunate on our part, and except when I have tried to study something specifically on Northeast, I have got only one book that is published by some few articles, which is an edited collection published by Zuban. Beside that, there are articles, but there is no mainstreaming of women's movement organized in the Northeast, Northeast India. So it is on the one hand very enlightening that you have you know given us so much information about these things. But on the other hand, what I feel that certain movements, women movements are canonical one, and these are brushing off the quote-unquote others based on regional specificity. So under this situation, uh, whenever we are trying to teach our students, or we ourselves are trying to learn something more about Northeast, could you please guide us, or share certain information about books and articles which can actually ground our knowledge on Northeast women's movement?
Sure, sure. Um, I mean, you're absolutely right that there is limited research that is being done and more work needs to be done. But at the same time, there are also collaborations and women's struggles and women movements from Northeast. Some of them have been also in discussion and in solidarity with larger women's movements in other parts of India. And there are, at least since last few decades, there are concerted efforts by individuals and organizations to bring together stories and share stories from different parts, including Northeast perspectives and insights. And of course, I'll drop a list, email you a list. And there are, in recent times, there are scholars like Papuri Bora, there are scholars like Hemang and what may be, this is University, I'm forgetting the name. So there are this bunch of very good scholars that have come up in recent years. And of course, we have pioneers like, our scholars from women's studies in Dibrugarh and Guwahati University. So there are people who are kind of doing pioneering work. Aparna Dr. Ma'am, who is no more with us, she has established, in fact, women's studies centers in many parts of Northeast. So there are pioneering people, and I will definitely share an email, maybe a reading list of those books. Yeah.
It will be really helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kaustav sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your response, and thank you, Amrita, for your observation. Any more questions? Any more questions or comments, observations? If you want, you can post your questions in the chat box also, if that is okay. Okay, so we have almost come to the end of our session today. I thank once again, Kaustav sir, for a very thought-provoking presentation.
My pleasure.
And the talk wonderfully captured in depth the philosophy of two very significant women's associations in Manipur and Nagaland. And the lecture helped us to understand the concept of triple marginalization on one hand, and at the same time, it perhaps has allowed us to, understand how in the midst of political unrest, the women of Northeast India have undergone transformation of roles from traditional homemakers to peacemakers and combatants in the conflict-ridden society, countering certain social evils and challenging the patriarchal norms at the same time. Thank you, Kaustav sir. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.